We are being live streamed right now. So, okay, not quite right now, almost. Now we're being live streamed. Bill Johnson, how are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. I'm in St. George, Utah. My family's having a little bit of reunion. Thanksgiving a week early is what we're doing, and we're all getting together tonight, but I'm free right now.
Well, that's fabulous, because what a wonderful weekend to have something to finally be thankful about. It's rare that the legal news gives us anything to be happy about, but I think today, November the 19th, is a day that's going to go down in history because now, okay, on one level, it seems that our side won, but on another level, I just want to ask you, why was this case such a big deal?
Well, first of all, let me say that we were in the car driving through Nevada at the time that we learned about it. And all the gals in my car just squealed with delight. They were so pleased. And a lot of them were not even really political. And so I was so pleased that they were so excited. These average, normal American women were so excited for this young 18-year-old kid. But to answer your question, I don't even know why the case was filed against him, because it was a weak case. But that didn't mean he couldn't have been convicted. And I think it was political. It was desire to go after people who support the right, people who support conservative America. And so it was just kind of a witch hunt.
Well, I mean, obviously the setting was that it was in the middle of right towards the end of the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd summer, right?
Yes.
And I guess I really, with you, kind of suspect that if it had been any other time in history, it probably would not have been brought, right?
I think that's true. However, I do think that it could have been brought because two people were killed and another person was shot. So in any type of situation, I guess there is, it is not inconceivable that an action could be filed, but it should not have been filed. And it was, the impetus for it was political.
Well, I mean, I guess we saw that even in the last week when somebody got a good shot of the prosecutor and focused in on his lapel pin, and the prosecutor's. Did you know what it said?
Was it a Star Trek thing or something like that?
No, it was Black Lives Matter.
Oh, really?
The prosecutor was wearing that kind of funny looking prosecutor. He was wearing a Black Lives Matter lapel pin.
Wow. I wonder if that in itself was improper. I don't know. Maybe Kyle should have worn an A3P pin to counter that. Yeah.
I think about Kyle's actual political views.
I don't. I just think he's probably just a Trump American. I mean, I saw pictures of him when he was a little kid trying to be a first responder and being an ROTC and being all these. I think he's just a good salt of the earth conservative American boy that kind of had liked the Second Amendment and probably supported Trump. That's what I think. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he had this dream of being a hero. In other words, he wanted to be of service to his community. It is exactly what you're saying. It's this dream of being able to help other people. I mean, he wanted to be. I mean, that was his original goal, was to help people who were injured. The first responder, as you said.
It's interesting that you would use the term hero. I was surprised in the car. The woman, the daughter of mine that I would least expect it said, wow, Kyle is a real American hero. We use that term too much, but it really should apply to him. And so that showed me the sentiment of a lot of American people. He truly was a hero, according to one of my daughters, and I think it's true.
Well, isn't that amazing? A hero won. I mean, it happened again. It just happens so rarely these days that there's a happy ending to a story. And I guess I wanted to talk to you in particular. Kenn Gividen is supposed to join us in a minute or two. He was running late, but he wrote me a couple of hours ago, and this is a very real question. In light of history, for example, O.J. Simpson, is there any possibility, do you think, that the families of those who died or were shot will file a wrongful death or assault suit against him?
They could, but I think the outcome would be different than the outcome of the O.J. Simpson trial. I think that they will have an equally hard time prevailing, just like the prosecutors didn't prevail against him criminally. So it might happen, but I think that it would be hard for them to win also. But I do think, and this is a caveat that we need to be aware of, I understand that one person that jumped on him and kicked him in the head. I forget what he was called, like the jumping jack guy or whatever he was called. It turns out that he was a black man, and Kyle had shot twice at him and missed him. And then it just towards the end, if we figured out who he was, it turns out he was a black man. Well, if Kyle had hit that black man, Kyle would be in jail for 40 years because we have a system now that we want to make sure that we punish white people when they're fighting against black people, because the blacks have protested so much, the whites just capitulate, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so what would happen is that had Kyle shot this black man, the outcome would have been different, I believe.
Are the three people he shot actually Jewish? Do you know? They're described in the press as Jewish, and yet I haven't been able to confirm that. Do you know?
Well, I don't know. The one guy was called Grosskreutz,
Yes.
which means large cross.
Right.
So that doesn't sound very Jewish to me. I don't know. I think maybe the Rosenbaum maybe was. I don't know. I don't think they're all Jews.
So it's just a German community. I mean, large German population in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, probably so. But I do believe that this might be a turn. Right now, over the years recently, I have seen miscarriage of justice of white people who have wielded a gun and they've been convicted way inordinately, whether they're a policeman wielding a gun or whether there's a stand your ground individual. I remember there was somebody that a black man attacked him and punched him in a parking lot because I guess there was a confrontation over a handicapped parking space or something. So he pulled a gun and shot and killed a black man, and the police initially refused to charge him because it was stand your ground, and then uproar in the black community, so they charged him, and a white jury convicted him and put him in jail for a long time. And then you have the George Floyd shooting. You have others where whites wield a gun against blacks, the whites lose in the court of law, and this is the first of, I hope, a change in the direction away from that trend.
Well, it's interesting because the other thought that I had when Kenn asked me that, and I guess I'd been thinking about it before. The civil liability hadn't really occurred to me for Kyle, but what about Kyle's opportunity to sue for malicious prosecution? What do you think about that?
Well, I do believe that the case could have been brought. And
it couldn't have been brought before today, right?
Well, no, it could have been brought. I mean, he wielded a gun, he shot and killed some people. So I believe that he could have, any prosecutor could have charged him. I think the prudent prosecutor would not have charged him.
No, no,
But
no, no. I'm saying, can he now file for malicious prosecution?
no, that's what I mean.
Now that he's acquitted.
I believe that he of course he can file for malicious prosecution because the jury came in and rendered a verdict in his favor. But I'm just saying that in order for there to be malicious prosecution, one of the elements you have to prove is that it was malicious and it was brought without, without due cause. And I'm saying that it could have been brought, a criminal action could have been brought against him, and there was grounds to bring a criminal action, so that undercuts his claim for malicious prosecution. But there is a lot of sentiment for this young 17-year-old turned 18-year-old. So the jury, I think, could very well be sympathetic to a claim of malicious prosecution, but I think that it would be an uphill battle. You think differently?
I'm really just pondering it because it's so interesting, because basically the predicate for a malicious prosecution claim is that the charges against you be completely exonerated.
That's correct.
And that predicate has been met. And so the big question is, what is next for Kyle Rittenhouse? I mean, he'll never be normal, right? He'll never be he'll never even be as anonymous as you are, and you're not very anonymous.
Time will tell. I mean, I understand that he does have an offer to be an aide to one of the congressmen, so maybe he can start entering into a political life. I think that he will probably, his notoriety will fade. He won't remain a celebrity. I think he wanted to become a policeman. And I believe that door has been maybe not completely shut, but partially shut, because I think very few police departments would want to have that controversy for them. So I think that he would not easily be admitted into the police force, but I think that he could accept a position with this congressman, work through there, and then ultimately find some sort of position. I think he's just, I don't even know if he's even ready to go to college, but there will be colleges, many colleges, that will refuse to admit him just because who he is.
Yeah, I mean, I just had this vision for him: Rittenhouse private security.
Well, I do think that because his notoriety is so high and his likability factor is high, I think that there might be a place for him in the media, maybe some sort of internet pundit position where money could be made. The trouble is, the way the media is rigged now is that so much, all of the monetization for these type of right-wing shows are defunded, so he couldn't get money out of it very easily. So I don't know what he's going to do. He's right now, I can tell you, he's probably enjoying basking in what has happened, but he won't be going to Disneyland, I can tell you that.
He's probably, I mean, he looked like in all the photographs, he looked emotionally exhausted. I mean, understandably just drained. But there's another aspect to all this, because I mean, when we were talking about malicious prosecution a minute ago, the question I hadn't wanted to ask you about is, if it's a marginal case for malicious prosecution, does that mean, what are the consequences of that for the defense, for the affirmative defense of self-defense, that it's so weak? In the evolution of the common law, does this mean that the common law has now evolved to the point that self-defense is not automatic, maintenance of public order, defense of others, all these sort of traditional common law justifications for the use of force, are those all gone now?
Well, no, but it is true that this particular case is highlighted by the times in which we live. And where in previous eras, he would not have been charged. He was charged because of the interpretation that we've put upon this very issue, where, oh, you shouldn't be toting a gun around in public, where our grandparents wouldn't be going out in the field without a gun on their hip. So I think that this might be a trend since Kyle won, the prosecutors lost. Their arguments that him carrying a gun was in itself wrong was a losing argument. So it might be that will change public perception and more receptivity to defending yourself with a gun. I do know that it is particularly dangerous for a white man to carry a gun in this society, because, I mean, you have the concept of rooftop Koreans, where they're holding guns and the roof protecting their rights for the riots for the what was it called, the Rodney King riots, and
the Los Angeles uprising, it's called.
Yeah, all right. So they're universally appraised. I haven't heard them criticized. Why? Because they're Koreans. So the fact now that a white boy was able to have the same defense might show that there's a trend away from this anti-white sentiment in the establishment.
Well, I mean, except the media was pretty much close to 100% against Kyle Rittenhouse, and the media is reeling in shock. I mean, you can just feel it in every article in the New York Times and CNN and everywhere. They're just, I mean, okay, what did I see? Let's see if I can find it again. I probably can't, but something about how, what is this really about? Somebody wrote, this is about Nazis depriving rioters of their rights.
Well, the article that one of my kids read to me in the car in Nevada, the headline was, it was a trial that showed that white men can use guns to deprive the rights of others, or something like that. I don't know.
So close to that.
Pardon me? Yeah.
So close to the same thing, except not calling them Nazis expressly.
Yeah, but the rank and file public was rooting for Kyle Rittenhouse, and it was only the left and the establishment that was opposed to it. But what I thought was particularly telling was the judge and how he handled the case. And see, this judge is the traditional judge that we've had, and I think he was looking for fairness. He let things go forward, and he was impervious to the pressures of the left. And we are seeing such a dramatic change in the judiciary that we're not getting these judges anymore. The new upcoming judges are activist judges seeking to promote the establishment agenda. So if Kyle Rittenhouse was tried in California before a newly appointed judge, or really a newly appointed judge in almost any jurisdiction, I think the outcome could have been different, because the judge would have been tacitly promoting the establishment agenda for his conviction.
Did you notice, it's a couple of, maybe it's just last week. It seems like this has been going on forever, but it was only a 2-week trial. It just seems like it's been going on forever. But the judge quoted St. Paul in a discussion about hearsay.
Yeah, I heard that. he did a lot of good things, and I do think that what brought to mind is that you have to be so careful what you say. He just said, "Oh, I hope we're not having Chinese food because it's all going to be caught up in the California, Long Beach ports that they can't come through," or something like that. It was just innocuous statements, and the mainstream media had a hissy fit calling him a racist. So you can't make any comment now in public but someone is going to try to dismantle your reputation.
Unless it's a prosecutor wearing a pin that says Black Lives Matter. And
Yeah.
Here's interesting. I have heard that prosecutors all over the country are wearing Black Lives Matter pins.
Really?
Which
Yeah.
is, obviously, even in cases where it's white on white crime, as here. I mean, this is, whether they were Jewish or not, they were, phenotypically white.
That just seems to me improper, but I guess the purpose of it is that if there are Black people on the jury, that pin will resonate with them. And if there are regular white Americans on the jury, that will not deter them from seeking the truth. So it's just, I think, a way for prosecutors to get an unfair advantage and manipulate the system where the whites look beyond it and the Blacks don't.
And possibly, it does remind some of the white people of the social context of what happened. And I mean, that's definitely an unfair advantage. And I guess, though, that, the defense wouldn't dare question that, because then that would clearly align them, God forbid, with us or something.
Well, Charles, what do you think about the quality of the prosecutor's presentation?
They didn't vet that one guy who testified that he threatened Kyle before Kyle threatened him. I mean, that one example that made the news was pretty spectacular. And I think that it was, well, there's several things going on. Prosecutors are so used to winning cases that basically legal skill is not something that they really feel they have to develop very much, because they, even the guy who lost this case, his conviction rate is still probably 99%. This is his one loss out of the past 100 cases. And so, I mean, he's still probably got the confidence that it doesn't really matter what he does. And I think that's part of the problem. And I mean, again, I'm wondering what the consequences of this case are for why the wider development of the law in America, really, because it's been so prominent. It was such a bad case. I mean, I heard some people saying, if the defense doesn't win this case, it's a message that all cases are fixed.
Yeah.
And I think at the very least we got past that. This case was not fixed.
Right. I do believe you're correct when you talk about his win-loss record of being 99% versus 1% loss, and this is his only loss. And I think that underscores the weakness of the case, why it should not have been brought, and it was brought because of political issues alone. And it goes to show that we have in this country, I believe, a lot of political prisoners where they are convicted and sentenced to jail, and the political prisoners that we have are not the Geronimo Pratts, the Black activists who killed white policemen. The political prisoners are the Yori Calls and these whites who are unfairly convicted because the establishment doesn't like white activism.
Speaking of such things, if we could change the subject very briefly and talking about white political prisoners, have you been keeping up with Charlottesville?
A little bit. I had to actually do some work for that. I had to be an attorney involved in for representing one of the witnesses.
Really?
But I think that it's possible that this could be a turning point, and maybe Charlottesville. I mean, I don't know. I know the trial is going on, but this may bode well for Charlottesville. If we can win Charlottesville as well, boy, it shows the trends were changing, that the rank and file jury is no longer going to just kick the white man to the curb.
Well, tell me, I mean, it's not going on anymore. Actually, it went to the jury today.
But still not, the decision has not been reached. What's your perception? How did it go?
I was going to ask you, I mean, who do you think the star, I won't use the word attorney because it isn't quite proper, who was the star advocate, in your opinion, in Charlottesville?
Well, okay, I didn't follow it. I only talked to people and got emails from them. And the person that I spoke with said that Cantwell acquitted himself well. And she said, well, he acquitted himself well because I had such a low expectation of how good he's going to do. And so maybe he did better than was expected. She also said she thought that Richard Spencer did a good job representing himself. And so I don't really have firsthand knowledge. I just know that she pointed out those two defendants, she thought each of them acquitted themselves professionally.
Well, basically, I would go a lot farther on one count. I would say that Chris Cantwell blew my mind. And I wish you had listened to it because basically this is a strange thing to say. You know all about my history in the public arena anyhow, but privately, one of the things that inspired me to go into law ever was the writings of Cicero. And, the idea of making really dramatic, creative arguments for what were in essence unpopular positions and persuading people. I thought that, crazy me, as a kid reading Latin, I just thought, wow, this is something I could really get into doing. It doesn't exist practically in the field of law at all. Ciceronian rhetoric doesn't. It's almost frowned upon, but Chris Cantwell did it. He was Ciceronian in his presentation. He was inspiring. He was awesome. I wish federal court had permitted the broadcast of it because it would have been a huge promotion for our side. Basically, this pro se litigant did brilliantly.
Oh, how do you know if it was not broadcast? How do you know that he did so well?
Because you could listen in on a special AT&T line that was in other words, you couldn't see it going on, but you could listen in. It was limited to 500 people. Every time I dialed in, I managed to get in, but I know that some people couldn't get in because it was capped at 500 people. But Chris Cantwell, wow, he had done a better, 1,000% better job than almost any pro se litigant without legal training I've ever seen in learning the law. But in addition to that, his presentation of the justice of the case was so eloquent and so well spoken.
Oh, that's so nice to hear, because this gal that talked to me about it, she praised him, but then she says, but I didn't have a high expectation from him. So it looks like even if she'd had a high expectation, he exceeded it. That's really good to hear.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chris Cantwell was mind-boggling. I was not actually overwhelmed with Spencer at all. I didn't think Spencer did all that brilliantly. He and then of the lawyers, what was interesting, Ken, hi.
Hey, how are you? It took me 15 minutes to figure out how to get in here. How you doing, Bill?
I sent you two invitations, two different ways.
I did not get them. Sorry.
Anyhow, I was just, Ken, did you keep up with Charlottesville at all? Because we'd been talking about Rittenhouse, but did you keep up with Charlottesville at all? Did you listen in?
No.
Okay, I was just saying that the star of the whole episode 4-week-long trial, in my view, was Chris Campbell. He did A+, and then after that, I would say that Michael Hill, as a witness, and his lawyers for the League of the South did the best possible job. Although another one of the rhetorically really dramatically really amazing moments was, I guess it's just yesterday, when the lawyer for the TWP, the Trad Workers Party, played an ad. I had never even heard this ad before. Were you aware of their video ad?
No. What did the ad say?
It was a presentation of white nationalism, and both the New Yorker and the New York Times said, "Oh my God, they're playing Nazi propaganda ads in federal court." But it was part of their closing argument and basically part of their statement that they opposed violence and supported a lawful transition to basically white government. It was amazing. The whole,
Well,
that was inspirational.
do you think that there's a chance that we'll get a Rittenhouse judgment in the Charlottesville case?
The jury instructions were very negative, and there's the biggest problem in there is that there's one defendant whose lawyer admitted he was there for the sole purpose of basically advocating that the damages against Alex Field be limited, James Alex Field be limited to compensatory. And he basically admitted that all the defendants would probably have to share in the compensatory damages because James Alex Field is in jail, will be there for the next 400 years, and can't pay. So, I mean, it's almost like they set up a poison pill, is the only phrase. I mean, why they had, there is no practical reason, no practical benefit to naming James Alex Field at all. He's in jail, he's been found guilty, and he's beyond judgment proof. And his lawyer basically was in there saying, you gotta award some damages. But there's no point in awarding punitives. And that was it. That was the extent of his role. And so and then unfortunately Kester's lawyer also.
And I mean, what damages did the plaintiff have? The plaintiff wasn't killed. The plaintiff was just there. What kind of damages did she suffer?
She was upset, Bill.
Okay. Uh-oh.
She was
Watch
really
out.
upset. She had bad dreams.
Yeah.
How much are your bad dreams worth?
That's right. Well, the jury has left for deliberations, and we don't know how long the deliberations will be in that case, but the deliberations for the Kyle Rittenhouse case lasted for 4 days. Why did it last so long if they were acquitted? Was acquitted.
I don't know, Ken. You have any thoughts on that? I mean, I was kind of afraid that they would be intimidated by the thought of possible riots. I mean, I was thinking that perhaps they were bouncing the ball around. Do we want to take the risk of being held liable for the riots that are going to happen? Are they going to come after us, or should we wait and see if the judge grants a mistrial so that he'll get all the flack, or should we just be totally risk averse and find him guilty? I mean, that was my vision of the debate going on in the jury room.
Well, I don't know what the makeup of the jury was, but what I think is that the majority of the jury were for acquittal, and several of them, or one or two or three, did not want to acquit. And so it took 4 days of the rest of the jury to browbeat the rest of the jury into accepting an acquittal. That's the only reason why I can think that they spend 4 days, because it doesn't take 4 days of serious deliberation unless some of them are wanting to convict him of some of the crimes. And I think that there were some good, upstanding American jury citizens that said, no, this kid is innocent, and through the power of their persuasion and reviewing the evidence, convinced the recalcitrant jurors to come along and acquit.
It's interesting because we heard this leak supposedly from a U.S. Marshal who should have not been leaking anything, but supposedly that's exactly what happened. That there were 2 holdouts, and that was reported. That was attributed to a U.S. Marshal, and that's a pretty serious breach if the U.S. Marshal who was guarding the jury's secrecy leaked that.
What did he say? He said that there were 2 holdouts, 2 that wanted to convict at least for some.
Yeah, it was no more detailed than that. It was no more detailed than that.
All right.
There was a series of studies, and by the way, my voice, as you can tell, is about shot. But there was a series of studies back in 1951 called the Ash Conformity Experiments, which they brought in a group of subjects. I think they were students, and they were shown 3 straight lines on a chalkboard, and they were asked which one is longest. And every student chose one of the short lines because that's what they were instructed to do. But one of the students in the group was not told that he was supposed to choose the wrong one. But still, just because of peer pressure, he chose the short line as being the long one because that's what everyone else chose. And I think we find that same thing going on in juries, like Bill was mentioning, that you may have had 2 or 3 holdouts, but just that peer pressure of everybody else saying the line is shortest, which in this case, I think they chose the correct line, which would make it even more compelling. But they also found in that study, if there were more than one individual who was not part of the control group, then they were less likely to to make the wrong decision. And so the more that were not in the control group, the more likely they were to make the correct assessment that, no, that's not the longest line. But there is a wonderful example of psychology there that we can use just through sheer peer pressure. If you have 2 or 3 people agreeing on something, that has a tremendous effect on everyone else. That, by the way, I think is the thinking behind the cancel culture. A little bit off topic there, but they don't want there to be any sense of agreement on anything to the right of center, nothing whatsoever. But going back to the case in point, I think you will find that happened maybe in the OJ case, where there may have been a couple holdouts that knew he was as guilty as sin, but still they were pressured. I don't know, I'm not a mind reader, but maybe they were pressured by the group, because we do know that is how the human mind works. Just a thought.
How do we get to be such nonconformists? There's Johnson, with an office on Figueroa Street in Los Angeles, and to the best of my knowledge, he's never really conformed to the thinking of 99.9% of the lawyers on Figueroa Street.
Well, I do believe that trends are changing. Like Kenn Gividen says, that there's a few of us bunching together, and that will eventually sway the tide in our favor. But that is a good question. How did we get where we are? Because when I was growing up, I was constantly told that racism was bad and you can't be support, in anything that I would say, you got to be careful because you don't want to offend the minority races and things like that. And we want to bring them up and just really promoting their interests, and the white persons embrace that attitude. Yes, we have to have affirmative action. We have to give them a helping hand up and all that kind of stuff. So even when I was a kid, that was the mindset of the establishment, and it has been browbeaten into society for so long that that's the accepted position. But that's changing because they've gone too far with this critical race theory, with the claim that white people are the problems of everything, the claim that white people took America and it's really Kalapuya land, or really Cherokee land, or whatever it is. That's failing to resonate with mainstream white America. And so there's going to be a bunch of us grouped together. The caveat is, the problem is that white people are becoming such a minority in America and in the world. I don't know whether we can affect change without serious confrontation.
Made me think of the question I've been meaning to ask you for a while. If you wanted to create an ethno-state in California, where would you do it?
Well, the bottom portion would be San Diego, and the top portion would be Maine, and then the other right would be Seattle, and then would be Fort Lauderdale, and all those points in between.
Oh, all the points in between. Once you add that, okay. All right. That requires, I think, what's called ethnic cleansing, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I think that you had, in the Eisenhower era, you had Operation Wetback that was quite successful. And right now, when I go down the streets in Los Angeles, you'll see Armenians will have on the back of their car, there'll be a rifle, and it'll say, unite, whatever. I guess there's some sort of dispute between Azerbaijan or something like that, or something between some sort of Armenian area and some sort of Baku, some sort of other country. And
those are the former Soviet socialist republics.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, picking out the Armenians, and the Armenians in California are driving around with their BMWs, with their leased BMWs with rifles on decals in the back. So they're banding together. But the point is that right now, I don't know if you call it ethnic cleansing, but they're removing people from the area. And if you take a look there's areas of Ukraine where the Germans were removed. And those things happen. So I don't know. I don't think you call it ethnic cleansing, but I think you can call it relocation.
Well, that's probably another podcast, but I want to go back to Rittenhouse for a minute, because Ken wrote me earlier before we started, and he asked me, and I just wanted to go back to that question. Ken, why did you ask me about civil liability for Rittenhouse?
Well, I was just thinking about the O.J. Simpson case, where the parents of the victim, I can't remember his name. Nicole Brown. Well, her friend.
Ron Goldman.
Ron Goldman, his family sought civil damages from O.J. Simpson. I think they won. And I just wondered if the same thing could happen here.
Bill?
Well, it can happen here, but I think it's less likely, because I think the jury would be favorable to Kyle again. And in order for them to get compensatory damages, damages from him civilly, they would have to show all the various elements that the prosecutors were not able to show. And so I think that he could prevail on those points. I think the jury will be in favor of this kid because rank and file jurors do look upon him as being a hero. And I think that the guys that were injured or were killed were not really good people. So it'll be an uphill battle for the plaintiffs' counsel to prevail against Kyle. Also, Kyle doesn't have any money. He's a 20-year-old kid without money. And so you don't have the same type of impetus. There's no money there for the plaintiffs to be able to get out of Kyle. And in Charlottesville, the plaintiff's lawyer was able to gather a whole lot of money from the various synagogues that they lobbied to get funds from. You're not going to have that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case because you don't have the same dynamic political explosive approach that you have with Charlottesville, because the plaintiffs in Charlottesville civilly, their one of their stated goals was to destroy the white nationalist movement. And Kyle Rittenhouse is just a little gun-toting guy that is not tied with anything like that. So I think that the chances of a lawsuit being filed against Kyle civilly are much smaller. There's no money there. He's judgment proof, and he isn't the target that the white nationalists are in Charlottesville.
Could Kyle seek damages kind of like Zimmerman? Can he do the same thing Zimmerman did?
I think that he can, because there was a trial and an acquittal, so that component is there. I do think that he will have an uphill battle because the litigation could, the prosecution could make a legitimate case that there was reason to file a case because he killed two people and wounded another. But yeah, he could prevail, and there is more likely that he can find a contingency lawyer to represent him in that situation, because the defendants in that case would have very deep pockets because they're municipalities.
And possibly media outlets.
Yeah, I don't really know what kind of slanderous statements the media has done. I know that I've read some email or some comments on the internet saying that there was slander and libel, but I'm not sure of any exact one. You know what it is?
Well, could they sue Joe Biden for calling him a white supremacist or whatever he called him?
I don't understand. Isn't that a compliment? I don't understand what your question is.
Yeah, yes,
it's there are several cases actually that said that have held that you cannot sue anyone for defamation for saying that you're a white supremacist. I've been, several people have asked that, and it's not a viable claim. But Ken, going back to your question about whether anybody is going to sue Rittenhouse, this is from the UK Independent, and I'm not, but it attributes the New York Post. The girlfriend of one of the two men shot dead by Kyle Rittenhouse has, quote, a lot of sympathy for the teenager, saying that he was just a dumba. Oh, I guess there's two letters missing there. Dumb a
yeah.
Who had become a figurehead for the pro-militia movement. Hannah Giddings spoke to the New York Post as Mr. Rittenhouse is acquitted for homicide charges. Mr. Rittenhouse shot and killed her partner, Anthony Huber, in Kenosha, Wisconsin last year. Mr. Rittenhouse said he was acting in self-defense. I do have a lot of sympathy for this kid, because he is just a kid to me. So it was kind of like a really dumb blank kid who unfortunately has become the figurehead for this, Ms. Giddings told the Post. So if the girlfriend is saying she has sympathy for Kyle, she would be, at least theoretically, one of the people withstanding to bring this suit. And it doesn't sound like she wants to.
It'd be,
she has to say something negative about it. So she's going to say he's dumb. And, but I mean, it does bring up a thought that I had before. Is he a figurehead for the militia movement? And is it going to strengthen the militia movement?
I don't know. There was so much opposition in certain circles to what he's done, and I believe that the National Rifle Association has distanced themselves from people like Kyle Rittenhouse. So he might be becoming a spokesman for the Bundy. What was that? Ammon Bundy portion of the Second Amendment. But I think that he will be kind of persona non grata among mainstream Second Amendment types. And of course, the militia is becoming more and more mainstream now. Anyway, because I just heard that Oklahoma is now considered, is no longer National Guard. It's a militia because they're not going to get the COVID vaccine. So the federal government says, okay, well, you're no longer part of our National Guard. And so this is great. We're a militia. And so when you have states,
that is awesome. I had not heard that. That is fabulous. I'll have to look that up.
Maybe militia is going to become a patriot movement among the various states. Yeah.
I'm curious, why was it that Bernard Goetz was victimized by those guys that victimized by the courts after he defended himself when he was attacked on the subway?
Well, he didn't have a right to have a gun. I guess it was an illegal gun, and he kind of did. It was kind of what would you call it? That Charles Bronson movie, Death Wish, or something like that. I'm sure it was called. He was lying in wait for him, and they certainly deserved it. But I could see how the media would hop on that, because here, I mean, of course, he was Jewish, but he gunned down 4 black guys. And it kind of taught him a lesson. But I think, didn't they get civil judgments against him as well?
Yeah, $43 million. Judgment. Okay. They didn't get the money, but they got the judgment.
Yeah. So that, I think that happened. Was that in the 1980s that happened?
Yeah.
84.
What year was it?
84.
84. I remember it vividly.
Yeah,
I remember that vividly. I was living up northeast at that point.
He was Jewish. I did not know that.
I think he was half Jewish. I'm not sure, but in any event, it was big news in New York and all around. But I think, he was criticized by the media, but not to the extent that Kyle Rittenhouse was vilified. And Bernard Goetz, I believe, was not as innocent a victim as Kyle Rittenhouse was. Kyle Rittenhouse went there to try to defend against looting, and Bernard Goetz, he got the gun to defend against himself, but he knew he did it partially to lie in wait for these guys, I think.
All I really remember about the Bernard Goetz case in detail is that he said he felt like they were playing with him in a game of cat and mouse, and that it had been going on for a while, and he felt under tremendous stress, but there was no immediate threat. It was not directly in self-defense. It was just like I guess a pattern of bullying or something. And
I think so. But then also what happened was, after Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed the people he did, he immediately went to the police to turn himself in, and they released him and let him go. Bernard Goetz went on the lam for a while. So, he that's a little bit different mindset when you're running away because you did something wrong, where Kyle went to report because he wanted to do what was right.
Rittenhouse is really interesting. I mean, he did play every card right that he possibly could. And I mean, you asked me about the prosecution earlier, and really, the interesting thing about this case is that it is so rare to see a case where every issue goes in the defendant's favor. I mean, even that one, even the voluntary surrender issue. He was not acting like a lawless person ever.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this: were his actions wise? I mean, was that a smart thing to do, to pick up an AR-15 and go to a place where you know there's going to be violence?
Well, 17-year-olds do a lot of things that are not wise. And so, yeah, I think that my kids said that, oh, he's a brave hero for going up there to defend this this car dealership from violence. And we need more people like that. So there are mainstream women in America that think he did what was good. We need more heroes like him. But coming from my perspective and maybe your perspective, I think, hey, don't get involved there because it's too dangerous. If he were my son, I'd taken his gun away, and if he still was planning on going over there, I'd have taken the keys away from his car. So that's my mindset.
I'm thinking of the Rodney King riots, which primarily occurred in a Korean business district, if I remember right. But the Korean business owners got up on the roof of their buildings. And I think some of those guys
was mentioning that earlier. It's too bad you didn't get here earlier.
He mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
No, but go on, Ken. This is a good point. This is a good point.
Well, my understanding is, and my memory is kind of foggy, but if I remember right, some of those businessmen, the Korean businessmen who were successful in defending their property, were either prosecuted or they faced threat of prosecution. I can't remember which, but what did they do wrong?
Yeah, they were threatened with prosecution, but in the decades since, Rooftop Korean is kind of looked at as a statement of admiration. You're defending yourself, and no one's going to break down your store. But I have the same sentiments you had, Ken. I thought, why is it fair for Koreans to be able to defend their property with rifles? And over the years now, they've been looked upon favorably, and our white people, if they take a rifle to defend property, get vilified. It's the anti-white sentiment that is prevalent in the establishment today. That's why all of us are activists, because we have to change that.
And what about the case in Georgia? Seems to me is that a totally different scenario?
What case in Georgia?
I can't remember the guy's name. Ahmed something, the jogger.
Oh, that's the jogger
Yeah.
case. Yeah, that's just another example of the white defendant in a precarious position because the blacks protest. The white jurors don't want that protest to happen, and they don't want to be viewed as being racist, so they'll convict their own white people when they shouldn't even been charged.
White people.
The amazing thing about that case is that, of course, the police refused to charge immediately. They actually went in and reported it, and the police did nothing, and it was only because of basically massive demands by the black community that this prosecution ever began. And I don't know, Bill, what's your general take on the relationship between law and politics?
Yeah, well, the situation we have now is that since the Martin Luther King era, it has been blacks protesting along with whites and along with Jews and along with other people to give more and more rights to blacks. And we've come to a situation where they're continuing to protest. They're not, instead of holding down jobs, they're getting government welfare. So they turn out to protest. They have racial consciousness, and the white people have been imbued with the concept of we need to help everybody, and they look beyond race, and whites are the only ones that do look beyond race. So you have no white allies on the juries, and you have blacks who are out to convict the whites, whether they're innocent or not. And that is just a troublesome confluence of anti-white sentiment that gets these Georgia defendants in a lot of trouble.
What is wrong with white people?
100 years of anti-white propaganda. I mean, if you go back to the Civil War, you had after the Civil War, you had the left-wing whites installed incapable, incompetent blacks in positions of authority in the South, and they lorded over the whites so much so that the white man had to flee the area. They all came and settled in Los Angeles. That's why at that time, Los Angeles was a strong hotbed of Southern support, because they had to flee, because whites in Washington, D.C. were putting blacks in power, and the blacks in power were making it miserable for the whites, and that was the Reconstruction era. But even before that, you had the Know Nothing Party, which was the American Party that was anti-immigrant, wanted to keep America white, and they were ashamed to even say that openly. So they would say, well, what about this policy? And the person running says, I don't know anything about it. I know nothing. So it was called the Know Nothing Party, because they refused to stand up for white rights. And that's been going on for the last 120, 30 years. So we finally need to, before it's too late, say white positions are important, and white people need to support their own.
Speaking of being white, Bill, your light is getting so dim, you've got to turn on a light, because you're turning gray. You're no longer white.
Right. I
Must
don't know
be
if
the
this
setting sun.
I'm at a resort, and so is that better?
Much better, much better. You look white now. You're recognizably white.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I think we've kind of exhausted most of these topics. So, is there anything else that you want to ask?
Well, I mean, no, I think we've covered it. I mean, what is your what if you were you were talking about the advice you'd give your sons if they wanted to be Kyle Rittenhouse, but what would be your advice and Kenn's advice to Kyle Rittenhouse right now? What would you tell him if you could speak to him right now?
Okay, I heard that he had an offer, I don't know how serious it was, to come be an intern in some congressman's office. I would tell him to accept that offer, go work as an intern, and capitalize on your notoriety through the Washington, D.C. Beltway connections. There is rising congressmen who are supportive of even our positions, and Kyle Rittenhouse is just more like a mainstream Trump type guy. I would say go work for that congressman. I think it's like Gosar. I forget what his name is, Getz or something like that. Whatever. Go work for that.
In Florida.
Yeah, what's his name?
Matthew Getz.
Yeah, Matthew Getz offered him a position to come work in his congressional staff, and so I think he should accept that and work out from there.
Who wouldn't like to move from Wisconsin to Florida? My God, you're telling him to move south, young man. Ken, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking again of George Zimmerman, where he just went gray rock. He just shut up totally. And I think probably his attorneys advised him to do that. I'm just guessing. But because there was litigation involved and he was suing who knows how many people, I think his attorney told him just to, don't say anything that'll upset the proverbial apple cart. So whether or not that applies here, I don't know, but I like Bill's idea, capitalize on your notoriety. He'll be stuck with this for the rest of his life, so he may as well capitalize on it as well.
I think that it's interesting. I mean, I think that maybe he and Chris Cantwell ought to get together that would be an interesting alliance.
If I were his father, I'd say pick the Florida congressman over Cantwell.
Well, Gatz has some interesting issues too. I mean, he's it's interesting that it's him. I'll have to look into that. But what I mean is that, you know, he can't join Cantwell right now because he hasn't been convicted. So Cantwell has about a year to go before he's out. But I have the feeling that this experience in Charlottesville is going to reflect very well on Cantwell, and I definitely want to make contact with Cantwell because, of course, as you know, I advocate self-representation as a path to independence.
Yeah. Okay.
And Cantwell has proved that a smart guy can be very effective in court. And one of the interesting things that I saw today was that Rittenhouse proves that fortune does favor the brave. He was brave at every stage, and that's part of what has gone in his favor. He, as you said, he reported to the police immediately. He always asserted that he was doing the right thing, and you know, that kind of integrity. I know you can. I know you've got to investigate this, and so here I am to help with you investigate me. He just did the right thing at every stage, and you got to admire that. And I just think that November the 19th is a great day to start your early Thanksgiving, Bill.
Okay. Hey, and Ken, we need to do more shows together.
Let's do it. Just say when.
All right. Sounds good.
I will make it happen.
All
Hey
right.
guys, take
Thanks
care.
a lot, you guys. All right.
Good night, everybody.
All right.